So, good evening, everybody, once again, and welcome to day 7 of this initiative called Daily Answer Wars and Daily Answer Wars Prime, done by Civils Daily. So, we are writing one answer every day, and today also in the morning a question was given, and I think all of you have written pretty well. I have checked out your answers on the Telegram group, and in this session, we'll again be discussing that question and then going on to check out the evaluation process and see how the answers are evaluated, and also we will be rating some of the answers that you have posted in the group before 2 p.m. So let us start with today's session. Again, we will go in the same manner. We will first discuss the question, and then if you have any doubts and all, you can ask in the chat box, and after that we will go for the evaluation of the answers. Question today was from GS3 once again, and it was pretty simple, I will say. Like it was basically from the internal security part, and since it was the last day of the week, I decided to give a not pick up a new GS subject today. So I decided to move on with GS3 only, and internal security was covered a bit less. Only we had covered about Naxalism, and also this topic was pretty important since recently, like the Prime Minister gave a speech talking about fake news. So this becomes important in that perspective, and also fake news is generally important because we see a lot of news around this and a lot of issues around this. So the question today was examine the impact of fake news on the internal security of the country and also suggest measures to identify and control fake news. So this was a 15 marker, and there were specific demands of the question. I think three demands to be pretty specific. One was talking about the impact of fake news. So that was itself a decent enough section which you had to write like 4 or 5 points there, which basically impacts the internal security of the country. And then you had to suggest some measures to identify fake news, like what all we can do to identify fake news in our daily day-to-day news consumption process. And then also we had to write few points on how to control, after identification, how to control the fake news. So basically 3 subsections were required in this answer, and again you could have drawn some flowcharts and all to make it more impressive. Otherwise we will move on with the same concept of introduction and then go on for the body and then conclude. Since it was again asking already way forward was already asked, you can say, because this is basically a type of way forward only, so there was no need to mention a separate way forward. Yes, the conclusion you could have presented a bit optimistic conclusion, integrated some generic points in the conclusion to give it a feel, give it a positive feel. So I have started the answer. So good evening, Manujanshu. Good evening, Harji. So basically, I've started the answer with just defining fake news or talking about fake news. So this was a pretty generic introduction. You could have given some data points also if you wanted. Like for example, you could have given in recent past so many cases of fake news but that was pretty difficult to remember and all, because every day that is increasing and that is a pretty random number. So it was safer to just define the fake news. So fake news can be defined as false, fabricated, manipulated information of sensational nature spread through channels of mass communication, namely print media, electronic media, or social media. Now this topic is also important because in GS3, there is a topic specifically mentioned in internal security, like impact of communication networks and social networking sites and all. That is a specific topic mentioned. So this question becomes pretty important from that perspective. So here I've just defined fake news, and it can be spread through mostly, like nowadays we are seeing it spreading through social media. Also there is some fake news spread through electronic media also. Print media is a bit less, but still it can also be spread through print media. So all the channels of mass communication I have included here in the definition. Next, after that, I have straight away jumped to the addressing the main issue or demand of the question, that is examining the impact of fake news on the internal security. So fake news has become a challenge for the internal security of the country. So let us look into the points what I have written. Like first of all, it is a challenge to the national security and law and order. And one thing you could have done is there are very many examples of fake news impacting the national security or some incident happening due to fake news. So smartly what you could have done is you could have just mentioned one or two examples in every point you tried to make. For example, you can see I have tried to do that. Fake news, with its ability to spread at great speed, presents a challenge to the law and order situation of the country, because we know that once a video is viral or something like that, it gets into like the inbox of all of us, so at a pretty rich speed. So example, fake news in Kokrajhar about dacoity and child lifting. What happened here is like, due to this fake news, two people were killed in this district because the locals accused them of this child lifting. So that is like a pretty tragic consequence of fake news, and that is also law and order and security problem. So I have mentioned that, given that example. You could have also given example here of like that Palgar Sadhu incidents. That was also pretty much in news due to like fake news of theft and all those sadhus were killed and all. So that could have been mentioned. Fake news can be used to manipulate the religious sentiments of common people and instigate communal hatred. Example, morphing the videos of religious leaders. So this is pretty common. Like we see a lot of speeches and all getting manipulated. Not only religious, even you could talk about political leaders also. So this is done to done to like spread this communal hatred, so that whatever speech is given, one portion of that is cut from that and just used to spark some mischief or some hatred amongst the section the mischievous people want to target. So that is being done at a large scale, and that could have been mentioned. Next, I've talked about this xenophobia thing. Like fake news can be misused to spark racial hatred or xenophobia among the people. So a few years ago, what happened was like in Bangalore, there were rumors of attack against people from northeastern India, and due to that, the people from northeastern India started fleeing. There might have been one or two incidents, but it was not a large scale attack, and it led to the fleeing of the people from northeast India from Bangalore. So that is a pretty tragic consequence once again, and an internal security matter. So it can be used to spark racial hatred and xenophobia. So these were the like sub points in my main point, that is like threat to law and order, or you can say threat to security and law and order. Next, fake news can also be a threat to the sovereignty and integrity of the country. So this can be established by, for example, you can see that fake news often supports the cause of secessionists and insurgents. Disinformation and fake news on Kashmir. Even in recent times, we see about news about Khalistan and all. So, and there is a pretty much strong sentiment in support of those elements also. So this supports the cause of secessionists and shows them in a good light, which is not good for the sovereignty of our country. Next, misuse by vested foreign interests inimical to national interests. Fake news by China on Arunachal Pradesh. Again, on many incidents, we see videos circulating on media and social media from Chinese propaganda outlets that the army is doing such rounds and all of that. So that is also a type of fake news uh, that is spread to support this vested foreign interest. Next, these points are pretty common. I think you should have written these. Let us deep dive into each of them. Threat to electoral democracy. Like this was pretty much in news because you know about, I think, allegations of Russian influence was there in the presidential elections of US, especially when Trump was elected. And then Cambridge Analytica case was also pretty much in news. So fake news has the potential to manipulate people's opinion and influence the electoral process. So if fake news is not stopped and it is not like regulated, it has the potential to manipulate people's opinion and influence the electoral process. So that becomes again a threat to electoral democracy, because then votes are gained on the basis of false information, and that should not happen in a democracy. Next, financial frauds can also fake news can also be employed to like destabilize the financial environment and financial frauds. This was also circulating when like 2000 rupee note was introduced. It was rumored that it included these GPS chips, which was not the case. So you could have mentioned about this also. Next, management of disasters and pandemics. Fake news also acts as hindrance in management of disasters, pandemics. Again, in the time of COVID-19, we saw a lot of fake news, especially related to vaccines and deaths and all. Like different varieties of fake news were circulated in this time, and that also affected the management of pandemics. In certain cases, police had to use like force also to stop the mischief created by the fake news. So that is also an important issue which you could have mentioned. So this was basically all in all the impact of fake news, or you can say the examining fake news's impact on security situation of the internal security of the country. So I think I've given you like a decent amount of points, and even if you could have written 4 or 5 among these, it would have been sufficient enough. So after that, we go on to move about the identification of fake news. Now this was pretty easy part, and I think all of you should have addressed this, because identification of fake news can be done by the stakeholders involved. So the main stakeholders in this case is the people of the country, one of the main stakeholders, because they consume the news, so they need to be active on their front. So I have talked about citizens. There is an imperative for citizens to take active steps in identification of fake news. So we must be proactive, like checking date and time of the published piece, adopting a critical mindset, cross-checking veracity from multiple sources. So these are some methods which we can deploy to identify fake news. Next stakeholder, you can say, are the social media intermediaries, because it is through their platforms mostly that fake news are being circulated. So at their level also, it is required to undertake like AI based interventions in order to identify fake, racial and communal news. Now artificial intelligence has grown like leaps and bounds. We are seeing even emergence of things like chat gpt now. So of course AI can, what they can do is like they can identify which all news is fake, and some of the social media sites have started doing that. Like in recent times, you can see on Twitter that there is a warning whenever a fake news is circulated by any political leader or anyone, any like verified leader or personality. They put a message if that news is not true, that the verification of this is like in doubt. So that is pretty much it. So this can be done by all the other social media intermediaries also, and they were the second stakeholders. So you can talk about, take the stakeholder approach. The first were the people of the country, next are the social media intermediaries, and the third stakeholder is the government itself. So government has also been doing its making effort on its front. So for example, you can see the PIB fact check and like stopfake.org. Many news are being fact checked by PIB. Even foreign governments are doing on their part. So you can just I mentioned this just as an example. Like Factually is a Singapore government website which does this fact check of their news items. So active efforts from the government can aid in timely identification of the fake news. So these were the basic stakeholders which can help in identification of the fake news. Now, one more point you could have added is about technology, because if you listen to the speech of the PM that he gave recently about fake news, like he was pretty much cautioning about the impact of fake news on the internal security, and he talked about technology a lot. Like he told about the 3 4 technological terms like Internet of Things and all, and how to use those AI and deep learning and all of those, how to use technology to control the fake news. So that therefore I've added one point about technology also, that technology leverage can aid in timely identification of fake news. Example, timely forensic audit of controversial videos and audios. What happens is, like once a video is circulated, it keeps on in circulation. So after 2 or 3 days, again we come out with a audit, you can say a forensic audit, that the video was false or something like that. But till then that damage is usually done. So what we need is like we need technology to get evolved so much that these timely identification of fake news there, all the videos, controversial videos and audios are quickly like identified as fake news and then given a stamp of fake news. So this was how we can identify fake news. Next, we go on to talk about control of fake news. So after timely identification, spread of the fake news can be controlled by, so this is pretty much a basic thing that you should have compulsorily mentioned, because this is pretty much in news, and also we get a decent amount of articles every 15 days on this topic. So IT rules, intermediary guidelines and digital media ethics code 2021. So this has basically some guidelines for the social media intermediaries to control the fake news. So I have just briefly mentioned, not I have not gone into the details. What you could have done is like drawn a flowchart for this and mentioned these points. So that would have saved you some space also and covered this topic. Like basically whatever you wanted to say would have been conveyed to the examiner. So some of the guidelines that these rules mention are facilitating identification for the first originator of the information. So whenever a fake video or a fake audio is circulated, these SSMIs need to identify the source of the video. So the first originator should be identified. So that is one of the guidelines of these rules. Appointing a person for ensuring compliance of government's regulations. So one person has been asked for every social media to uh, so that government can contact, to basically a liaison type officer who can be connected in case connected by the government in case of these fake news identification and all. Next is grievance redressal mechanism for resolving complaints of the victims or users. So this has also been mandated to be put in place. Now, regulation of content regarding news and current affairs. So, overburdening the websites with news and current affairs is also not very much in demand. So, regulation about this should also be there. So, this was basically about the IT rules, and this should have been mentioned by you in order to talk about controlling fake news, because this is pretty important happening in recent times. Next, you could have gone in for some of the generic and preachy type points, which I have also tried to mention here. For example, this withholding internet services. So this is the favorite pastime of the government, you can say. Whenever the situation gets in out of control, they try to curb the internet. So this can be used, but I have cautioned it that as a last measure, you can withhold internet services in the sensitive region. It is always better to prevent the loss of lives and all, rather than just allowing internet and allowing freedom but allowing loss of lives also. So to prevent loss of lives, and as a last measure, the internet services can be withheld. So that is also one of the points in order to control fake news. Now there is also a need for creating a social deterrence. Like only legal measures or rules and regulations will not do. People should also be made aware, public awareness should be there, and people should avoid falling into a negative bias. So you can say that it is basically a bottom up approach, not a top down. So the legal measures are basically the top down approach done by the governments, but these approaches are bottom up approaches, so that and this especially the bottom up approaches are mostly effective, because if you are not liable, if you are not pliable enough to fall to the lure of fake news, you will not get affected by fake news. So whatever the rules and regulations might say, so therefore this bottom approach is pretty effective, which you could have mentioned. Also there was a Satyamev Jayate program in Kannur schools in Kerala. What they did was teachers were appointed to sensitize class 8th to 12th students, I guess, to sensitize them on fake news and help them on how to identify fake news, and teach them, basically train them on identification of fake news. So that model can be employed across the country. So that is a good example you could have mentioned. Next, again, self-regulation by the media can also be done. For example, we have seen a lot of fact-checking websites and all, which have emerged in recent times. So you could have mentioned one or two examples of those. Although the fact-checking websites themselves are not free from allegations and all, but still, if they are function properly, and if they are verified and run with authenticity, fact-checking websites can help in regulating the fake news on social media, especially not only social media, in all forms of media. So I've given some examples. So Google has a fact check explorer. There's a website called Wavecoof by the Quint. So these things you could have mentioned as examples. So that was all in all enough for this answer, I think. In all of these sections, I mentioned 4-5 points each. This was a 15 marker, so you had decent enough scope to write all your points. I think if you were sort of space, you could have written one section through diagram and all. Next, finally, you could have just concluded. So, in conclusion, as I told you earlier, a bit of optimistic approach I have taken. Fake news is often a result of yellow and tabloid journalism done to grab eyeballs and raise TRPs. So, it is usually done to raise TRPs. So, such predatory journalism against national interest. So, basically, we're talking about national security. So, fake news is against national interest. So, collaborative steps, and by collaborative steps, I mean that. Steps by the government, by the social media, and by the people, all of them collaborating together, need to be taken to check the same. So that was a generic enough conclusion, which all of you could have been written. That was simple and crisp. So I think if you would have written an answer on these lines, decent enough marks could have been expected out of this question. So that was it. Now we move on to checking some of the evaluating some of the copies that you all guys have written today. So first of all, I move to Sahiba's copy. So let us see, examine the impact of fake news. Okay, fake news or horse news. I think she has mentioned hoax. Okay, hoax news refers to false propaganda. So propaganda, I think spelling is a bit wrong. Propaganda published under the guise of authentic news. Okay, it is deliberately created to misinform the readers, which can be propagated through any media, print, electronic, and social. So this is fine. Impact of fake news on the internal security of the country. Fake news can break the fraternity among citizens. It sparks panic and raises conflicts. Fine. Kaveri dispute and malicious rumors and fake news led to the entire. Okay, fine. It affects social and communal harmony. It is fine. Radicalization of youth, swinging public opinions, etc. Fine. Acting upon the fake news circulated through social media. Incidents of mob lynching have increased. This is also fine. Some examples could have been mentioned. A simple fake news can make people run for their money from banks, causing mass panic and causing law and order. Okay, it's used to vilify the image of political rivals while impacting democratic right to choose the right candidate. This is also fine. Extremists and fundamentalist groups are using fake news as a tool for spreading unrest in the society in Kashmir, Northeast. Okay, okay. So decent enough answer. To, some points from the angle of sovereignty and integrity of the country, for example, used by like terrorist organizations and even state actors like China spreading fake news in case of Arunachal. That could have been mentioned as that is an important security issue. So keep in mind the keyword here, internal security. So otherwise, these things are fine. All of your points are good. I have also mentioned these in my answer. So I think uh, overall it is fine. Just talking about sovereignty and integrity a bit would have been better. And next, we move on to fake news damages. Fake news example from Indian. Okay, so example you need not write like separately. You just try to uh, mention it along the points that you have mentioned. Try to integrate it. Otherwise, there is no use of writing examples separately. So, for example, these Muzaffarnagar riots can be mentioned where you talk about communal passion and communal harmony and all. I think there is a point that you have mentioned. I guess, yeah, it affects social and communal harmony. Here only you can talk about the examples and no need to mention it separately. Challenges in controlling the fake news. Okay, no standard definition, difficult to achieve balance, lack of regulation, tracking fake news. So this is fine. However, there are some legal measures to identify and control this menace. Legal remedies is so here what you could have done is like separated these two words, like identification and controlling both are different things. You can identify something, but if you do not wish to control, you won't control it. So identification is one issue and controlling is one issue. So I think first you could have talked about identification. These points are basically about controlling because you are talking about legal measures and all 153A and all hate speech. So and next you are talking about just a way forward. So go along the question, I will say again. So this part could have been addressed a bit better. So first give some points on how to identify fake news and then go on to talk about controlling. Also the IT rules I think have not been mentioned a bit. So I think you could have talked about that also. This IT act is just not enough. You should have talked about the recent rules. And next is other measures that can be taken. Bring out policies, would bring out a draft seeking. So talk about these in controlling only whenever when you are talking about controlling. So they are not asking what measures have been taken or already done. So they are asking you to suggest measures. So you can add both of those things. Whatever measures have been taken, you can mention those. No issues. And then again, you can also add some of your own innovative measures that you think will be helpful in controlling the news, like using AI, educating the end users, bringing out policy. All of these can be mentioned in that part only. So basically, you have not written about identification. Other than that, most of the things are mentioned. IT rules could have been mentioned also. Misinformation is not like a plumbing problem you fire. It is a social condition like crime that you must constantly monitor and adjust to. So this is fine. Good conclusion, I will say. And all of these points are good, but I think try to make the proper subheading, differentiate between identification and controlling, and also talk about identification of fake news. So overall, I think you will get 5.5 out of 15 for this answer, Sahiba. Next, we move to Harji's answer. Fake news is false or misleading information presented as news, and usually it is created to influence people's views, to push a political or communal agenda, or to cause confusion. Also, it can be a profitable business. ठीक है, fine. Impact of fake news on internal security. In this digital era of social media, it is very easy to spread the fake news within no time. So social media plays a negative role here is spreading. No, no. Social media plays a pretty negative role. वो तो समझ गया. You have written it in the introduction, I think. So you can mention it here in the intro also that media plays a role. Here you need to write the impact, like how the news is spread is not asked. So you need to talk about the impact of fake news, like what happens when the social when news is spread through social media and all. So just talking about negativity will not cut it. You need to mention some examples also, like what has happened. For example, you can talk about child lifting rumors, you can talk about lynching of people, mob lynching and all. You can talk about all of those things. Fake news can break fraternity, sparks panic. So this is fine, raises conflict. Communal tensions may develop. This is also good. Increasing incidents of mob lynching across the country, fine. Fake news is a severe threat to the security of the country. It is very hard to trace the origin of the fake news, and so security agencies cannot act. Definitely. I don't think this is a point. Like ये तो पूछा ही है question में कि fake news is a threat to the security of the country. So basically, you are just re-emphasizing it. So trace the origin and all is okay, but uh, you can talk about this and how to control the fake news. Like we need to trace the origin. Also, these IT rules suggest tracing the facilitator first source of fake news. Fake news has the ability to create lasting hatred among various sections in the society. It is also so यहाँ पे फिर से again some points are repeating I guess. You have talked about communalization and then again talked about polarization among Hindu Muslims and all, so that it can be mentioned there only. You can talk about electoral democracy, like impact on elections and all. You can talk about, like I will say, sovereignty of the country, uh, foreign interest trying to destabilize the country. You can talk about the financial angle, image of political leaders. Okay, the extremist and fundamental groups are using fake news as a tool for spreading unrest in the society in Kashmir. Okay, fine. Has the prospects of destabilizing markets and causing. Okay, fake news can make people run for their money from banks, causing mass panic and breakdown of the. So okay, I'll say you have written pretty elaborately. Like a lot of points have been mentioned, but थोड़ा सा क्रिस्प कर दीजिए इसको. Like some points which are not required, जैसे ये point was not required here. You can give example of social media in intro itself कि it is spread through social media and print media, all of that. और उसके बाद just go on writing about the impact. जितना crisp, जितना to the point आपका आंसर होगा, you will get better marks for that. Because the examiner will basically understand that you are not beating around the bush. ऐसा नहीं है कि आपको 10-12 points लिख रहे हैं. So write 5-6 points, but try to be like pretty much to the point in those. You can just underline the first dimension, like threat to law and order or threat to sovereignty, financial threat. So that basically explains that you understand what you are going to explain in the point. और फिर उसमें थोड़ा छोटा छोटा कुछ लिख दीजिए कि explaining that main thing. But still it is fine. Most of the things are covered, I think, especially in this part. So now let us move to the next part, measures to identify and control fake news. Again इसमें आप इसको थोड़ा सेपरेटली लिख सकते थे. चेक द सोर्स ऑथर. सो ठीक है, ये फाइन है आपका. मतलब आइडेंटिफिकेशन के बारे में बात करिए आपने. मेंटेन ए क्रिटिकल माइंडसेट एंड ऑल्सो चेक द फैक्ट. दिस इज गुड. कैन यूज फैक्ट चेकिंग साइट्स, एग्जांपल. ओके. Educating the end users by informing them about verification tools, internet shutdowns. Okay, so pehle, so first 3-4 points are good about identification, and next you are going writing about controlling. So वो भी ठीक है, like, but just differentiate it. Subheading डाल दीजिए to identification first and then about controlling. And in controlling, I think you need to mention the IT rules. You have not mentioned. There's no specific law against fake news in India. There are only some provisions. Okay, Aadhaar can be linked with social media accounts, prevented social media literacy for people can. ठीक है, ऑल ऑफ द पॉइंट्स आर गुड. जस्ट थोड़ा सा जो आईटी रूल्स है, क्योंकि वो बहुत न्यूज में रहता है और काफी इंपॉर्टेंट है, बिकॉज गवर्नमेंट इज डूइंग लॉट ऑफ थिंग. कमेटी फॉर्म हुआ था, डेटा प्रोटेक्शन कमेटी भी एक फॉर्म हुआ था. तो दैट मेक्स इट इम्पोर्टेंट. सो ट्राई टू, अगर आप उसको नहीं भी एग्जैक्टली आपको याद नहीं है, तो ट्राई रिमेम्बरिंग 1 or 2 points एंड इंटीग्रेटिंग विथ दिस पार्ट, हाउ टू कंट्रोल. वैसे ओवरऑल डिसेंट अटेम्प्ट आई विल से, बट थोड़ा सा स्ट्रक्चरिंग एंड सब हेडिंग्स में better कर सकते हैं. I think you got it what I said. Reduce the rhetoric and be to the point in that part, and in the second part go for subheadings and try to mention the IT rules. It is almost impossible to completely remove fake news menace, but still it can be controlled by the combined efforts of governments and governments. Okay, fine. So I think you will also get 5.5 out of 15 for this answer, Harji. Next we move to Pooja's answer. Fake news as a deliberate lie or a half-truth circulated with the intention to mislead people or cause harm to a section of people. Okay. Impact of fake news on internal security of country. Communal tensions is fine. Misleading people, spreading false propaganda or maligning people. Okay, the extremist and fundamentalist group are okay, fine. The rapid spread of false information through social media will increase incidents of riots and lynchings. Use examples here. एक दो examples डालिए सब में. This is severe threat to security as victims are mostly from minority community and perpetrator as faceless mob. Okay, security agencies cannot act. Definitely, it has prospects of destabilizing markets and causing huge losses to the country. Provides entry for non-state actors by increasing divide between. तो ठीक है, just try to give some more examples क्योंकि काफी examples है fake news पे, especially in recent times. तो तीन चार एग्जांपल्स दीजिए. ट्राई टू टॉक अबाउट द सॉवरेंटी ऑफ द नेशन ऑल्सो. जो इसमें आपने सेक्सेशनिज्म की बात करी है, लाइक हेयर वेयर यू हैव मेंशन्ड, समवेयर यू हैव मेंशन्ड आई गेस एक्सट्रीमिस्ट एंड फंडामेंटलिस्ट ग्रुप्स. तो यहाँ आप सेक्सेशनिज्म की बात कर सकते हैं बिकॉज दैट इम्पैक्ट्स आवर सॉवरेंटी. नाउ यू कैन ऑल्सो टॉक अबाउट फॉरेन नेशंस एंड ऑल्सो लाइक फॉरेन बिजनेस ग्रुप्स एंड ऑल विच ट्राई टू डिस्टेबलाइज द कंट्री इंटरनली थ्रू फेक न्यूज. तो उसके बारे में भी बात कर सकते हैं. So this is fine. Try to incorporate these things, and I think that will be it. Next is way measures to identify and control fake news. Again, इसको आप थोड़ा separately लिख सकते थे. Like identification is a separate part, and controlling is a separate part. Accountability of social media. ठीक है. Rebuttal, it is a form of fact checking wherein the fake news is pointing out errors. Like ठीक है, removal of fake news from social media. So you have not talked about identification, I guess. कंट्रोलिंग वाला पार्ट ठीक है. legislations to quote fake news, any structure legislation, certain fake news, and ombudsman institution to deal with the credibility of new news source. अब ये for example this is mentioned not exactly ombudsman but in the IT rules it is mentioned that one liaison officer or something like that be there to be connected in case of fake news and all. So उसको आप integrate कर लीजिए. Mention some of the provisions of the IT rules to make it a bit more better, like more impressive this part. Strict regulation, government should have independent agency. Okay, government should have mechanism for immediately using a notice against sites. Okay, de-anonymizing all social media accounts. ठीक है, ये भी. The government should bring out a policy with the input from various stakeholders. Controlling fake news and press council of India needs to be formed and empowered in as well to enable strike balance between freedom media and speech on one hand and अरे इतना लंबा conclusion नहीं लिखना है. And this never ending statement you are writing, so no need to write such long statements. थोड़ा क्रिस्प रखिए इसको. फॉर एग्जाम्पल दिस स्टेटमेंट इज गोइंग ऑन एंड ऑन. द गवर्नमेंट शुड ब्रिंग आउट ए पॉलिसी विद द इनपुट्स फ्रॉम various stakeholders of controlling fake news, and press council of India needs to be reformed and empowered in a way as to enable it strike balance between freedom of media and speech on one hand. So you can see that ये बहुत ही clumsy हो जा रहा है. तो don't try to write such big statements. और इतना लिखने का जरूरत भी नहीं है. Once you have talked about identification and controlling the fake news separately and in a crisp way, you don't need to write such a long conclusion. Just talk about ki all the stakeholders should come join hands and collaborate in order to stop the menace of fake news, and that is it. और उससे ज्यादा लिखने का कोई जरूरत नहीं. इफ यू हैव सम गुड कोट ओवर फेक न्यूज वो सब आप डाल सकते हैं. अदरवाइज इतना क्लमजी नहीं डालना है कंक्लूजन. लाइक इट मेक्स इट नॉट लुक गुड. So I think overall this part can be addressed better, especially the second part. First part आपने ठीक ठाक लिख दिया है. थोड़ा सा examples you need to write more. Otherwise it is fine. In the second part of the answer, identification wala issues missing hai, and some of the rules and regulations are also missing. So I think you will get 5 out of 15 for this answer, Pooja. Next we move to Sweta's answer. Fake news is news stories or hoaxes created to miss. ठीक है, type of fake news ठीक है ये भी. Impact on internal security, identify spread of fake news through social media as emerging risk. नहीं again impact emerging risk, we understand it is an emerging risk. So this line can be used in introduction. पहला first line can be this, that WEF has identified spread of fake news through social media as emerging risk, and then go on to define fake news. Impact, what identification of fake news as emerging risk से impact के बारे में तो कुछ पता नहीं चलता है ना. So talk about impact here. Communal tensions are fine, mob lynching is fine, destabilizing market, huge losses ये भी ठीक है, democracy is also fine. Again थोड़ा सा इसमें those issues that I have talked about, for example ये regionalism, secessionism, sovereignty, so internal security वाला dimension सब दिमाग में लाइए. मतलब think on those lines. So whenever we talk about internal security, we think about terrorist organizations, we talk about like foreign actors destabilizing the country, we talk about those things. So you can think on those lines and try to integrate those points here. So that will make it better. Otherwise also these points are good. Like this is basically These points are strictly from the perspective of internal security, मतलब domestic issues. So इसमें थोड़ा सा foreign issues which can impact our internal security भी आप डाल सकते हैं. How to identify is fine. Check the source author is okay. Check if it joke or satire. Check the facts. Maintain critical mindset. Use fact checking sites. So ठीक है, but again ये आप this all these points apply to the people only. So try to again increase your dimensions, like how can government identify fake news, how can the social media intermediaries identify the fake news, and how can the people identify fake news. So both all these three dimensions can be included in this part. Measures to control में this will be mostly by the government and SSMI. इसमें people का कुछ खास role नहीं है other than awareness and all bottom up approach जो I talked about. So you can talk about that. Other than that, here you can mostly talk about governments, news and social media. Okay, digital media literacy, awareness campaign ठीक है, strong functioning monitoring system, latest technologies okay, CMS ये सब तो ठीक है, complaints can be filed on ठीक है. ओके सो अगेन इसमें भी वही है, आपका आईटी रूल्स ये सब मिसिंग है जो काफी इंपॉर्टेंट है. सो ट्राई टू मेंशन दोस थिंग्स. लीगल एंगल इज मिसिंग इन दिस पार्ट, सो आई थिंक दैट कैन बी मेंशन्ड एंड अदरवाइज दिस आंसर इज फाइन. बाकी सब चीजें ठीक है इसमें. Any steps to curb fake news shouldn't curb right of individuals' free speech and expression. Also, as it is not possible to completely remove fake news, the most important role is of public the awareness and critical analysis to identify right from wrong and become a ठीक है. This line is also fine. Any steps to curb fake news shouldn't curb right of individuals' free speech and expression. So ये ठीक है, but I think you can avoid it in this answer because ये especially this is talking about controlling the menace of fake news. So ठीक है, but still you can write. That is not an issue. But even if you just write this last statement, I think that will be enough. Or I think here also you can mention the IT rules. और इसके अलावा in this part you can talk about stopping the internet and all, which the government usually does. So those points are missing, I will say. So overall decent attempt. Some points are missing as I told you. In all the three parts, तीनों parts में कुछ points missing है, so I think marks will be deducted for that a bit. बाकी structuring of the answer is fine. You have understood what the question is demanding and gone according to the flow of the question. So I think you will get 5.5 out of 15 again for this answer, Sweta. Next we move to Avnish's copy. So okay, manipulation of algorithms, social media and search engines to reach large audience and mislead news consumers is a global fraud now, I guess. मतलब मैनिपुलेशन ऑफ एल्गोरिथम इतना कॉम्प्लेक्स क्यों कर रहे हैं? मैनिपुलेशन ऑफ एल्गोरिथम्स ऑफ सोशल मीडिया जरूरी नहीं है, मतलब ठीक है, these social media algorithms are manipulated, but fake news, spreading fake news is quite simple. Even you can spread a fake news if you come to it. So इसमें कोई बहुत manipulation of algorithms का जरूरत नहीं है. Just a clickbait video can get viral. That happens. Fake video clips, news stories with mod media logos, bots, paid commentators for payroll, online reputation become very common. ठीक है, government are using the threat of fake news to clamp down on free speech. अरे ये statement तो यहाँ required ही नहीं है, क्योंकि again here you are contradicting basically what you have written in this two parts. So अगेन आई विल से दैट गो अकॉर्डिंग टू द क्वेश्चन. जो क्वेश्चन ने पूछा उसके हिसाब से आंसर करिए. इंट्रोडक्शन इतना लंबा लिखना ही नहीं है. 3 पॉइंट्स अगेन मेकिंग सब पॉइंट्स, ये सब जरूरत नहीं है. डोंट मेक सब पॉइंट्स इन द इंट्रोडक्शन इटसेल्फ. जस्ट गो फॉर राइटिंग 1 or 2 लाइंस एंड दैट शुड बी एनफ. बस जस्ट डिफाइन फेक न्यूज एंड उसके बाद इस पे आ जाइए, इम्पैक्ट ऑफ फेक न्यूज ऑन द इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी. Arrest of postcard news for spreading false information aimed at creating communal discord. ठीक है, बट पहले बोलिए कि communal discord, give this as an example. So you cannot start your point with an example. मतलब you can do it, but बहुत कम cases में where mentioning the example is quite necessary, या फिर एकदम they have asked examples only in the question. There you can start with examples. Otherwise try to mention the main issue first and then go on for mentioning the examples. US election bots भी ठीक है ये. For example, this is okay, Cambridge Analytica data scandal. So again, यहाँ पे जैसे US elections, you can just talk about like it can destabilize democracy. उसके बाद फिर आप example दे सकते हैं US election, Cambridge Analytica and all. So try to mention the main issue first and then go on for mentioning the examples. Hacking of social media sites and data theft is okay. In India, WhatsApp is the platform most vulnerable to fake news. ठीक है, कर्नाटका fake news about rival party views and abuse of media and internet remain a concern. ठीक है, अगेन आई विल से कि आपका योर आंसर इज मोर एग्जांपल रिच, और सिर्फ एग्जांपल्स के थ्रू ही यू हैव ट्राइड टू टैकल दिस पार्ट. but I think you can just go on for mentioning some of the issues also. Uske baad then go on for mentioning the examples. uh, Issues that I will suggest mentioning are, for example, you can talk about sovereignty, integrity, you can talk about law and order, you can talk about mob lynching, communal harmony, and all of that. So first mention these points, then go on for mentioning the examples. Government measures for identification. So yeah, government measures is not asked. Basically, they are asking overall measures. So suggest measures for identification and control has been asked. So government is one pillar of that. So you have to talk about all holistic answer. They are expecting a holistic answer. No law is fine. Free publication of news, okay. Press Council of India can warn, admonish, ठीक है, News Broadcaster Associations represent. So basically, you're talking about controlling the fake news. ये सब ठीक है. IT Act आपने mention किया है, 66 section 66, IBF भी ठीक है. NBA, but you have gone. अरे all of these are like single point. मतलब एक ही point को आपने तीन parts में break कर दिया है. This is basically about broadcasting association and federation and all of that, press council. So you can integrate all of this and mention more dimensions. For example, you can talk about IT rules. You can talk about government steps such as banning, stopping the internet. You can talk about social awareness, bottom up approach. वो सब आप लिख सकते हो इसमें. And also identification is missing, so I think maybe some marks will be deducted for that. Conclusion: fake news is often created and circulated for gaining frequency and political gains. Again, conclusion थोड़ा सा this is fine. Fake news, ये आपका introduction, it looks more like an introduction rather than a conclusion. In conclusion, try to be a bit optimistic. थोड़ा सा उसमें लिखिए कि people, stakeholders should collaborate in order to control this menace. So after this line, you can just mention that. So overall, I think you will get 4.5 out of 15 for this answer, Avnish, because I think there are certain things missing in this answer, especially content-wise. थोड़ा आइडेंटिफिकेशन वाला पार्ट लिखना है. कंट्रोल में भी कुछ you need to increase your dimensions in the answer, or also in this part, the body of the answer, you need to go first the point, make the point first, and then go for the examples. Introduction can also be shortened a bit. So I think 4.5 out of 15 is what you will get in this answer, Avnish. So that is it for today, guys. I think I have tried to review some of the copies. Again, we will meet on Monday. So enjoy. Happy Christmas, Happy Xmas, and participate in the Night Owl discussions today. And again, we'll meet day after tomorrow. And thank you very much. We will come with a new topic and start most probably pick up GS1, I will say, on Monday. So thank you very much. Happy holidays and happy answer writing.